specialize in music most people hate. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check out our Facebook page, Instagram, and our website. Let us share the noise with you.
Yo, this is John from Noise Dosage Media, and this episode is brought to you by Begrudgingly Benny. Interested in putting something horrific and grotesque on your next piece of merch? Benny is tucked away in the fiery depths of COVID quarantine, blasting the filthiest of old school death metal and drawing hideous creatures that he is waiting for you to adopt. Go over to Instagram and follow @BegrudginglyBenny and contact him if you would like some really weird original art for your band or label. Super professional, highly recommended. So I'm going to start with the first question here. Between 2010 and 2018, where did the breathing process stand? It seemed like there was a big gap between albums here.
Yes. So the band was initially from Connecticut. That's where I grew up and where it all kind of started. 2010, we were done. We had toured on our second album, Odyssey Undead, for like six months or so. It was a really short tour cycle for us because the album before we toured for like a year and a half on it, probably. But it just kind of like everything just kind of, we were all at an age where we had spent the last like 4 years on the road and doing nothing else with our lives except for, living in a van and stuff. And everybody just kind of started to feel the fatigue of that lifestyle, I think, because it's not, touring for underground metal bands isn't like Motley Crue in a bus and coke and strippers and the fun stuff. It's mostly just grueling long drives for no money. And
dude, Motley Crue
survival
gets brought up on this podcast so many times, and I don't understand it.
Because they're
Everybody's
the perfect
like,
example of of the rock star life.
Yeah. Because, I ask them, I'm like, so, tour questions and stuff. They're like, well, it ain't Motley Crue. I'm like, all right.
Because, that's what, like, people, like, my friends from, like, high school that have nothing to do with music, when I say that, like, I'm on tour, that's what they envision. And they have no idea that I'm actually, like, scrounging the cup holder for loose change to buy, like, a pickle at a gas station or something.
Oh man, those hot pickles, those spicy ones.
Those are definitely a favorite. The bag, what are they called? Dilly bites or something like that, I think.
I thought they were just called pickle in a bag.
Oh, you're talking about like the whole pickle?
Right. Yep.
Okay, so there's these things called dilly bites. They sell them at like Sheetz or some other gas stations. It's just a perfectly it's a little bag with sliced like pickles, and they have spicy ones, and it's incredible. Anyways, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So we all just kind of were just burned out from the road because like I said, we'd toured for about 4 years without much time in between. So I don't know. We all just kind of decided to let's just kind of take a break. Like, we'll write another album, but we don't have any rush to do it. Our contract with the label we were on was up at that point anyways. So we had time to figure it out. And then I moved to Pittsburgh. I think in 2011 or something like that. And, just kind of being getting more accustomed to adult life. Like, you kind of have, it's real easy to get used to and to get kind of complacent in.
Yeah. Then you're like, shit, man, I got to go on tour. Fuck.
Yeah. It's it becomes more of a, well, shit, I kind of like having money and, being able to do things without constantly worrying. So there was never a plan of well, we're going to break up or anything. It was just kind of, we'll figure out what we're doing as we take some time, and we'll all still write and stuff like that.
Because I noticed, man, I looked on every time I look into a band, I go on the Encyclopedia Metalum, and I looked on past members. I'm like, holy shit, man, they've been grinding for fucking years, man. So, you look past the music and you're like, there's a lot more to it, man.
Yeah, for sure. Like, there's one thing I've mentioned this on another podcast before too. Like, those sites, the people that they list as ex-members, like 90% of them were never actually like members of the band. It
Right.
was like one person filled in on like one or two shows, and then magically they're online as like former guitarist or former bassist or something.
Former.
Yeah, or like one person like that is on there, I don't even think played any shows with us at all ever. Like, he was going to drum for us, and then our original drummer ended up just staying in the band. So like there was at one point when he was going to leave, like the drummer we used to have on the first album, not the one we have now, but he was like he was going to leave and just stop playing music for a while. So we started working with another drummer to get ready for like some shows we had. And this was when we were still like not even a signed band or anything. And somehow that person is listed on every single one of those websites as former drummer. And I'm like, how do they even know who this person is? I don't understand it.
They like stalk your Facebook.
So it must be, yeah. Like, and I mean, for me, like, I don't really consider like a good portion of those years, because it was a lot of that, like before probably 2007, like we were just a local band in the Connecticut scene that like no one other than people in New England knew, and we sounded way different. And we were just kind of all young musicians trying to find like
a
sound. Yeah. So until like 2007, when we switched into like what, kind of the style that we have now, that's really like what I consider like the beginning. Or it's just because the earlier than that was just like a completely separate thing. It just happened to have the same name.
Gotcha. So off of the touring question, what are some tips or advice that you could give to a band that's like first, like thinking about going on tour for the first time?
Okay. My first piece of advice to anyone that asks me this question is don't fucking do it. Because it sucks, but it's a necessity. So like, it's just part of the gig. You have to get out of your hometown and you have to go play places. The best way to do it is, I think, and this happened with us too, like, had we not had that mentality of like, we have to put 100% of our time and energy into a band and go on tour even though there's no money involved, you kind of like that. If we didn't have that mentality then we probably would never have gotten signed or gotten like the touring opportunities that we got, because you kind of need that level of like grinded out mentality to be in a band that's like serious about doing anything, because it takes a long time to like generate any revenue, if at all, if ever. But in my, as I've gotten older, I've realized like a lot of the tours, not a lot, but some of the tours that we did, like we could have easily just not done them and still probably, gotten to the same place. But we were so eager to just, be in a band on the road that we didn't think about anything. We didn't think about expenses. We were just kind of like, we'll just wing it and hope that we survive. And luckily we did pretty much every time. But, so the best thing to do is just realize that it costs a lot of money to tour, and the more money,
of time, dude,
and a lot of time, and the more money that you have set aside for that you're not relying on the band to make back for you, the easier it is to do. So like, to put that into perspective, now that we're all like in our 30s and are semi-responsible adults, like when we go out and tour, we don't do it because we need the income from the band to do it. We all work normal jobs that we're lucky enough to all kind of be in positions where we can go tour when we want to. But we're not like if we don't make a dime from touring, we don't come home like with a, soup can
sad
in
face.
Our hand on the corner and a sad face. Yeah. So and you still accomplish the same thing. You're still promoting your music. You're still playing shows. You're just smarter about it. Like you don't need to like to go and tour for 2 months straight as an unknown band anymore, especially with the internet. Now,
exactly.
You
just drop a really good fucking album, man. Like that's all it takes is one YouTube channel to just be like, whoa, these guys are amazing, and you're fucking golden.
Like a perfect example of that is Shadow of Intent, where they, rather than, I mean, like the main songwriter plays in another band called Currents, who is kind of touring and stuff already. But for Shadow of Intent, they spent all the time that some bands would just say, let's go tour, whether we're ready or not. They spent that time just writing and recording. And when they made a product that sounded, really good, they put it out. And then their fan base just grew organically without them ever playing a show ever. Their first show that they ever played was in Connecticut, and it was sold out the first night because they actually built something that people wanted to see. Because
I feel like that would be super nerve wracking. Like, the thing is, like, technically they haven't played a show before.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, we're playing to a packed crowd the first night. Here we go.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, I can't imagine like that. That would probably be like nerve wracking. I still get nervous on some shows, like a little bit before we start. And I've played like thousands at this point in my life, So like, I can't imagine what they would probably feel like never really performing the songs together on a stage and just going from that to being, sold out crowds and whatnot.
Right. Big
crazy.
As fuck. So how many albums should you have out when you start touring? First, like an EP or?
I mean, the way I look at it is like you can. Me personally, like I wouldn't tour until like you have people buying or streaming your music from all of the places that you're planning on going on tour to. Because the scene when we were like, the kind of the early 2000s or mid to late 2000s, like you could go tour and be completely unknown back then because people would just go to shows because like out of town bands are playing as far as like local underground kind of shit goes. Yeah. So it was doable back then, technically. Now, like with the internet, everybody can find out about anybody, So if
there's no like underground to it.
Yeah. Anymore. I mean, even though it's still technically the underground, but yeah, like it's, so if no one knows who you are, like, yes, you'll land like a show once in a while where there's just other good locals that draw on a Friday night. You'll get some exposure, but if you don't have any product to deliver to people, like how would they ever remember you? If you don't have an album out, like, yeah, you might be really good at that show and people might cheer and mosh and be like, oh, good set, dude. And like, you'll feel great. But the next day they don't remember your name or where they can find any of your music or anything,
Gotcha.
So to me, there's no point in touring unless you're on like without having like a lot of music out anyways, unless you're on like a tour with bigger bands that draw people.
Right. Or so what you're saying is don't tour and rely on local bands.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's
because I feel like that happens way too much nowadays. Like,
yeah.
And I don't mean that in a negative way, but like it's tough because I see bands do that all the time in fucking Rochester.
Exactly. And that's kind of what happens with, when the tour market gets kind of oversaturated. Like you have so many bands that all have, a decent amount of streams online. So they all want to tour at once, but all of them can't tour on the same tour, obviously. So, people like a lot of people aren't going to go to a show every single night of the week. They're going to pick the ones that have a bunch of like a few bands that they like to go see rather than, maybe just one and a bunch of like, local bands. I mean, granted, a lot of people do go to local shows and it's a huge, important part of getting into music in general, but you're right. Like, so to me, some bands like, if you're relying on locals only for the draw most places, then, you're not. What are you really accomplishing, I guess?
I see a bunch of fucking bands that tour and like by the time that the headliner gets on, everybody's gone. And it's like, fuck, dude. Like,
we see those all the time.
It's like, what the fuck, man? You're a great band, but like nobody's here.
Yeah. Wow. And that's kind of the thing is like, I feel like every band, if you're really serious about it, you should go tour. Like go book like a week or something that gets you a couple states away from home and just kind of see what living like that is like and everything. And then when you get home, you learn a lot. You learn like, okay, so we lost X amount of dollars, because I don't think any band goes out and tours the first time and gains money.
Well, we made $1,000.
Yeah, we sold this many of our demo or our album or whatever. And then you kind of ask yourself, like, could we have sold this many records, like doing something other than going on this tour? You know?
Right.
So if you lose $1,000 on a tour because, you know, it's just you and like local bands and no one has any idea who you are, then you could have spent that $1,000 on like a really awesome marketing campaign online for your album or for a single, and probably gotten a lot more album sales out of it, because that's really what touring is. It's to support an album. It's to promote your music.
Now, you know? Now when you say like the campaign, what do you give me a more in-depth thing, like description of that?
So there's like plenty of companies or public relations firms that specialize in like this kind of music, like metal. You pay them X amount of dollars, they get your album on every like metal media website, like Metal Injection and Lamb Goat and stuff like that.
Yep.
It just gets it out to places that you can't just as any person. Like I couldn't send our album to, you know, Metal Injection and be like, hey, can you review this and write an article on it? Because they get hundreds and thousands of those like every day. But the ones that they take are from PR firms, because they have a relationship with them already, you know?
Right. They probably get commissions off each.
Yeah, or something like that. So it's just, it gets you circulating more. Whereas before, like the internet was, you know, the standard in our way of living, people would find out about music by just going out to shows. That's why, you know, back then you could tour without a huge name and you'd still promote yourself pretty well, because a lot of people went to just local shows to discover new bands that they'd never heard of.
Yeah. You know? Now they just sit home on fucking Spotify.
Exactly. So it's kind of, it's touring before you need to is kind of phased out by the internet now. Like you don't need to go spend a bunch of money on like playing to nobody when you could be home writing more music and better music and getting the exact same or more promotion for yourself.
Right. Or do a live set. Nunsaw just did one and it fucking was sick, man. There was like 500 people watching. And for a live video, that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
So on with that press kit thing, do you have any like recommendations? Because like I'm starting a new project and shit, and I've never gotten that realm of even thinking about that shit.
So press kits are like, I mean, I guess they're still used. They're probably in a different way now. Like what most people that can help you further your career in music, most of them, what they're looking at is how many people you can draw in your own city as a first thing. I mean, there's other factors too. Like a lot of bands that get signed are like from their bands made out of people from other bands that were signed that have some kind of relationships. They know that you're like, you know, a label worthy songwriter, so they'll check out what you send them because, you know, you at one point at least were deemed good enough to be signed to somebody. When it's like the first time you're doing that at all, or like you don't have, you know, industry relationships and stuff, the best thing you can do is just put your music out and promote it. Like the first thing they're going to look at is, you know, YouTube plays, Spotify plays, that kind of stuff. It's like that's their gauge for how many people are interested in your music.
Right.
But then also, I mean, there's still, it's rare nowadays, even though like it's kind of how the industry ran for a really long time until streaming and all that stuff. Like there's a rare occasion that you could just send a label your demo and they will sign you off of the demo because it's just that good. Or, you know, they hear something that like they know is going to be like huge if it's produced the right way or something like that. That does happen still. It's just a lot more rare. Yeah. Like I've definitely seen bands that were like, they just wrote some really good songs and sent it to the label or sent it to somebody that put it online and it blew up, you know?
Right. So one more question off the touring thing. This is kind of a fucking hilarious one, but
Okay.
should you dump all of your money into merch or a reliable vehicle?
Oof. Man.
Because
That's-
either you're not going to make any money on the tour or you're not going to make it back home.
Yeah, so it's kind of a double-edged sword there. Merch is always super important because you can sell that from home too. You know, it's always that's you're literally as a person in a band, you are literally a fucking t-shirt salesman. That is
Yep.
like that's job.
literally that's all
that's
you
what you're
really
doing.
make money off of.
Yeah, it's like, and then when you get to the next level, then you're more inspirational to people, and you have a lot more purpose than just selling t-shirts. But for the most part, when you're still in the grind stage, like you really have to think of it as like, we fucking sell t-shirts for a living, and it's great.
We are the t-shirt drug dealers.
Yeah. You know, so like putting some money into merch designs is also another thing that is important because people don't buy shitty looking t-shirts. They buy cool looking t-shirts, you know? Now, on the other side of that, a reliable vehicle, if you have a broken vehicle and you're in the middle of Texas and you live in Pennsylvania or something, you're going to sink a lot of money into it. So like you need, the answer to this is basically you need both. You can't have one without the other. If you buy a brand new 15 passenger sleek looking van but have nothing to sell to people, how would they ever remember who you are past the day that they saw you?
Right. I mean, when I came up with that question, I'm like, fuck, man. I mean, it's a very standard and dumb question, but it's like, I'm just curious on how they'd fucking answer. Because that's a tough one.
Yeah, I think you definitely need both. Like most of the tours we do now, we just we're lucky enough to have a guy in Pittsburgh that like rents these big diesel vans to bands for tours.
Right. Well, my thing is I see so many bands when they go on tour nowadays, and it's like, well, we're broke down. Can you give me a GoFundMe check? It's like, dude, like, why are you driving a shitty fucking vehicle?
Right. So that brings you back to, you know, the first question, which was, you know, when should you go on tour? If you can't afford to fix your vehicle to where you're stuck in the middle of nowhere without like just draining your life savings, then it's probably not the best idea to go on the road.
Right.
You know, like a lot of like bigger sign bands, like they draw enough people to where they make enough money so that if they have vehicle problems, they can pay to fix it, or they're renting a vehicle where the maintenance is taken care of by the rental company as part of, you know, the contract you signed.
Gotcha.
You know, but if you're just trying to buy like we've done so many tours in like beater vans that we spent like $1,200 on or something like that, and like thinking like, yeah, we got a sweet deal on this hog, you know, and like we get pretty far into the U.S. and it's U.S. It's a big country when you're driving from one side to the other. Like if you get stuck out in like Utah or something like that, it costs a lot of money to like get yourself.
They're like,
back
oh,
home.
it's a band. Let's raise that price up, dude.
Oh yeah. That's the other thing too. Like, and again, back to Motley Crue. Like everybody thinks, oh, you're a band, huh? But you guys touring with Motley Crue or something, you know? And it's like, no, we don't have any money or anything. We can play you a song if you fix our transmission.